This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. When the mob invaded Capitol Hill yesterday, the House and the Senate were meeting in their respective chambers to hear debate over an objection to the counting of electoral votes from Arizona. One of those in the House chamber was Democratic Representative from Florida, Stephanie Murphy, and we welcome her now back to Bloomberg. So welcome, Congressman. Thank you for joining us. Give us a sense of what happened yesterday from your perspective.
Well, from my perspective, David, thanks so much for having me. But from my perspective, it was a very difficult day in the history of the United States Capitol. But at the end of it, I think we all saw that our democracy prevailed, that once the chaos was settled, we went right back to work, and that the rioters weren't able to achieve their goal of using violence to influence a political outcome. And this was It's a hard day for me in particular because I'm a refugee. My family escaped the tyranny that was imposed by the Vietnamese government, and this country rescued us. And it has always been a beacon of democracy for my family and so many others. And I love my country so much, and I never take for granted our system of government. And that's really why I'm so heartbroken about what happened yesterday.
There are various people now are pointing fingers. It's inevitable when something like this happens. And a lot of attention has been focused on President Trump, who did go out and speak just before this all happened and said it was all a stolen election. At the same time, is there a larger issue here about our democracy and the extent to which we all feel like we're in the same country? These are people that certainly President Trump has led, but I'm not sure that they didn't have some real concerns about the country before he came along.
Well, you're putting your finger on what's really problematic is that there are people who are very angry. They see a government that isn't working for them, that isn't serving them, and they are being fed and they're consuming information that isn't based in fact. And there are colleagues of mine, as well as the president, who fanned the flames that resulted in this kind of violence. We have to figure out how, as a nation, we can come together and turn the page on this chapter of hyper partisanship and people living with different realities of what is going on in this country. We have to figure out a way where we can work from a common set of facts and then move forward with our different political ideology on how we address those sets of facts. But right now, with foreign interference and the influence of social media and, the way our news is produced, we are creating bubbles of information and they don't intersect. And so you're seeing people who are acting on that information that they're receiving, and it's not always true.
One of the specific proposals that's come forward has been invoking the 25th Amendment to the Constitution to remove President Trump immediately, and that has now been espoused by as high up as a person as Senator Chuck Schumer, now the minority leader, about to become the majority leader of the U.S. Senate. Does that help us put this behind us and move forward, perhaps as one country, or does it make it more complicated?
Well, let me first just say that I think it's unacceptable that we have a president who has repeatedly condoned and even encouraged this kind of violent behavior in order to achieve his political end. And I think, if the vice president were willing to support the 25th Amendment, I'd support him in that. But really, right now, I think our goal should be to ensure a peaceful transition of power. So, that means that we focus on January 20th and we make sure that what occurred yesterday doesn't happen again.
So we have the transition of power and something of a crisis surrounding it, which I must say I'm surprised at. That hasn't been the case in the past for the most part in the United States of America. We also have a pandemic going on. I know it's affecting your home district, north of Orlando, as well. One thing that I think everyone could participate in is a unified approach to getting ahead of this pandemic.
Yeah, I used to work at the Department of Defense, and when I was there, we were dealing with the H5N1. Anyways, we were dealing with the avian flu, and it was a very deadly disease. And what we discovered in dealing with that disease is that we have to have a whole of government approach. to responding to the pandemic. And unfortunately, we don't have leadership right now in the executive branch that is providing the infrastructure for a whole of government approach. And in fact, what we have is that we have leadership in this country that has decided to politicize the bare minimum safety things that people could do to keep themselves safe, such as wearing a mask. Somehow that has become a political statement. And so that's putting more people at risk. So I think, and my community is a victim of all of this. Our infection rates are increasing after the holidays. Our hospital systems are changing their status from green to yellow and stepping it up to red. This is a real serious issue. So I'm looking forward to the new administration taking a more comprehensive approach to addressing this issue. And we have got to crush this virus if we want to see an economic recovery in this country.
Congressman, you mentioned that in a prior life you worked at the Defense Department. You were involved in national security. As we watched that video yesterday, it didn't make us feel really secure. What will be done going forward? What can be done to make sure that we don't have that repeated? That, in fact, we do protect our capital and we protect our lawmakers such as you?
So what we do usually at the Department of Defense is to have an after-action report. So there needs to be an analysis of what happened, how people responded. And the good news is that there are cameras all over the congressional campus. And so we'll be able to pull together all of the facts and the details and lay out a timeline and assess what happened. Today we are still in the midst of the fog of war. We're still trying to clear out tear gas out of some of the hallways of the Capitol. And so when that fog of war lifts and we get the data, then we can take the information and address it and improve the security that was remiss in this situation. The continuity of government is critically important to this democracy, and we have to do better than to have allowed an angry mob to breach our U.S. Capitol and intervene and interrupt the process of democratically affirming the electoral count for the new president.
Fog of war in the halls of our Capitol, something that I never thought we'd see. Thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate it. That's Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy, Democrat of Florida.